Kurt Cobain, born February 20th, 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington. His life started out like any other child. He had a happy and well-formed family with a father and a mother. He began singing and playing piano at only 3 years old, and at 7 years old he was labeled as hyperactive and prescribed ADHD medication, Ritalin, as well as sedatives to counteract the insomnia he had experienced at night. Unfortunately, this would be a recurring theme throughout his life from his prolonged drug use. When his parents divorced at 9, his world flipped on its head. Cobain states in an interview that he desperately wanted a typical family with a mother and a father. This divorce made it so he struggled to find compatible male friends at school, so he ended up hanging around women for the majority of his high school life. This gave him an insight onto how women were mistreated at the time, and he felt that women weren't treated with respect and were totally oppressed. This plays a role into how he, as an icon, used his power later in his career when he became famous to fight for women's rights and is almost seen as a feminist. This shows his maturity and ability to stand behind and fight against oppression, which is a recurring theme in his life. So what makes Kurt Cobain an icon? Well, he could be classified as an iconic rebel simply because he refused to conform to the standard rock and roll mentality of drugs, sex, and love. His fashion varied from the typical mainstream fashion, and he popularized the ugliness that was grunge music and applied that to his fashion. Fans of Cobain generally followed his motifs and beliefs, and quote-unquote, had a distaste for stringent social rules. He rebelled from the mass media and materialistic nature in the 90s, and a quote that perfectly describes his motives: "I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not." Cobain and his band Nirvana were pioneers of the counterculture grunge, and grunge took heavy inspiration from the earlier punk movement in the 1970s, but instead of prioritizing rejecting social norms, grunge was characterized with betrayal and nihilism, being betrayed by the government and the mass media for brainwashing the mainstream audience. Cobain, through his music, exposed his hidden anguish of society. At the time, through his rageful lyrics and melodies, he took the unfinished scratchiness and imperfect nature of grunge music and moved that into his fashion. The difference between punk and grunge is that grunge was almost easier to get into. You didn't have to completely disobey society and dress very extremely. It was more just dressing in a certain way that showed you were slightly different and you weren't glam. And we'll touch on that more later throughout the presentation. Cobain's fashion is similar to how grunge and a music genre challenged the glam style of pop music. The fashion behind grunge was much the same. Rejected mainstream conformity, and Cobain popularized the stylishness behind looking poor and cheap. Even with the millions of dollars he had, he stuck to his roots, wearing damaged jeans, work boots, and flannel shirts. As you can see from the picture on the left, that's him attending the MTV Music Video Awards in 1993, and you can just see he's got distressed jeans on, striped long sleeve t-shirt, ragged Converses, at a venue that celebrities are wearing dresses worth thousands and thousands of dollars. He's just stuck to the same outfit he's worn thousands of times in public, and that's just because he's just authentic. This can be partnered with Cobain's rise to stardom and childhood growing up in poverty in a decaying town, providing him with his humble attitude towards fashion. And at this time, this was viewed as dull and unexciting. Yet this was the point of the grunge movement. It was not to care about what other people thought. It wasn't really to show off. It was more to just say you're authentic, you're real. Fashion and materialistic things weren't of worth. And Cobain was really the first celebrity to actually follow through with this instead of just putting it on for his character. This is actually how he thought, and that's why he's so cool and influential in this way. He allowed a generation of younger people to follow along in his movement, not characterized by thousands of dollars spent on clothing items. Instead, anyone could join in with the grunge movement. Cobain's fashion influence is quite interesting. In the beginning of his career, his fashion could be seen as trickling across, as his fans and followers would adapt his low effort yet impactful fashion sense, putting their mind into their fashion, their beliefs. And then later in his career, his fashion would trickle up. His style went from being judged by major fashion labels, which were opposing in style and more glamorous and expensive in designer, such as Gucci and Saint Laurent, to having, in quotes, every notable house honor the star's groundbreaking life and rule-breaking contributions to the fashion world. And clear examples of this can be seen in the pictures on the left. There's the Gucci Winterfall 2020 men's, and the outfit that the model is wearing is almost identical to some of the other outfits he's worn in previous slides. And on the right, in 1993, while he was still alive and his career was still going, Perry Ellis did a whole fashion show in tribute to Kurt Cobain's style. This shows how Cobain was unintentionally one of the most influential fashion icons just by being himself and being authentic. That's why it's so cool that Cobain managed to succeed in just doing what he loves and what he thought. He's the absolute epitome of authenticity. It's pretty clear to say that Cobain is more than just a grunge icon. Could be easily seen as a gay rights activist and many other groups. In a time where AIDS jokes related to homosexuals were rampant and slurs like FAG were passed around commonly, Kurt never failed to publicly affirm his pro-gay stance. He was never shy to talk about politics, and in 1992, Nirvana issued a public statement and played a benefit concert opposing a statewide anti-gay initiative in Oregon, which was so bad that it required all governments to treat gays as abnormal, wrong, unnatural, and perverse. Following this, on their studio album Incesticide, they stated, in quotes, "In any way hate homosexuals, people of color, or women, please do us a favor and leave us the F alone. Do not come to our shows and don't buy our records." When other rock stars remained just playing music and producing records, Cobain stood out and used his authenticity, influence, and wisdom to fight for the rights of oppressed groups. Other rock stars were too afraid to fight against these issues, but Cobain was in it for more than just the fame. He truly wanted to help other people, whether at the time it would lose him his fan base or have people go against him. It didn't really matter to him. He was more than just a grunge icon. This can be easily seen on the image on the screen, showing him on the cover of The Advocate. Cobain used his freedom in fashion to also help promote his activism. He appeared on the cover of The Face music magazine wearing a floral print dress, and Cobain would constantly wear gowns to sold-out concerts to encapsulate his unconcerned nature with the constructs of gender. This can be seen on the picture on the left, where he was playing in his early times of Nirvana wearing a floral dress. This taught a younger generation to, quote, adapt a sense of fluidity within their wardrobes and, quote, embrace the blurred lines of sexuality. He encouraged those who followed to let go, be free in their tastes, and to do what they thought was right, not what society decided was best for them. This also links to modern day gender fluidity, where Cobain's message is still being preached to this day. This shows that his ideology has echoed through a generation and is still making impacts to this day, only reinforcing how much of an icon and how cool Kurt Cobain was.